Let's see if this is live. Let's see. Are we live? Yes, looks like we are live now. Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. It's time for another monologue. As usual, it is me, Kushalmehra. So today I'm going to be talking about the Aryan invasion or the Aryan migration theory, whatever we want to call it. So, as always, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to steelman the Aryan invasion theory. What is the claim of the people who proposed the Aryan migration or the Aryan invasion theory, basically? I'm not going to speak a lot. I'm just going to keep it to 10 to 15 minutes. I'm not going to get into a lot of details. I'm just going to give you the key thesis, the key words that they use, the key things they talk about. Because what I noticed is in so many podcasts that I've done on this subject and all the time that I read and all my interactions with people online, even with people who disagree with the claim of the Aryan migration or the Aryan invasion theory, on the non-left, or actually people who support the Aryan migration and the Aryan invasion theory on the left, actually don't know a lot. They basically, anybody who supports it or opposes it, they just do it based on their ideological and socio-political leanings. It's not a very well thought of opposition or support. So what I thought was, I've done so many podcasts where I've basically poked holes into the hypotheses. I like to call it a hypothesis personally, but I mean, we are stuck because it's called a theory, so I have to stick to the word theory all the time. But in my view, it's a hypothesis because it's not really backed by evidence. But it's not about what I think, it's about what they try to present. So what I'll do is, I'll speak right now. I'll try to speak for a while, and you guys can keep chatting in the meantime. And as usual, I will take all your super chats first. That will be the first priority. I don't think so that any questions were asked on the Patreon, so I'm going to skip that. And then after that, with whatever time will be left, I'll try to take some other questions too. I'm going to keep this short, and also once the monologue is done, I'll also try and explain to you guys about why I've started my Patreon and what I plan to do with the Patreon. That is also one of the main reasons I've started this. I've decided to do this monologue today. Okay, now let's start. So, what is the Aryan invasion or the Aryan migration theory? So, what are the origins of this theory? Obviously, so I have some notes on my cell phone. I've taken some notes, written some notes down on my cell phone, and I have some typed some things off too. So I'm going to be reading. So, who are the founders? So, what is the base of this theory? Basically, there are two key players in this. Obviously, the first is the famous British judge William Jones, who gave this proposal of the similarities between Sanskrit and other European languages, and basically came up with the concept. I mean, he didn't come up with the concept of the Indo-European language family, but he spoke about Indo-European language families in this famous speech. I think it was 1786 that he spoke about it in Kolkata. Obviously, the first person who actually found this similarity between European languages and the Indian languages was a French Jesuit missionary. His name, I have to write it down because the name, I'm not good with French pronunciations. Gaston Laurent Cordeau. I think in 1767 he wrote a book, and that's when he made this proposal, or he hypothesized this thing where he basically came up with the idea that there seems to be a similarity between these languages. So that was the first step where they found out similarities between different languages, and they basically came up with the concept of a Indo-European language family, where these, how did they find it similar? I mean, it's common sense. You look at Sanskrit words like brother, and then in English, for example, you find brother, and etc. I mean, mater, mother, daughter, daughter, the usual stuff. I'm sure you guys know about this. Then the second step comes is Max Muller. Now, Max Muller actually, his proposal was obviously the same, that there was, because if there is a similarity between these languages, there has to be a common ancestor of these languages. So Max Muller came up with the theory of the Aryan invasion. It's very interesting that even Max Muller's theory has two parts of it. Max Muller initially was very categorical in saying that there was an Aryan race that came into India. Later on, because of the misuse of the Aryan invasion theory by Europeans at that time, for example, there was a lot of racism underneath, and Max Muller, if I remember very correctly, he had taken back his things and he wanted to disassociate with the racial aspect with it. But to be very honest, when Max Muller had proposed it, there was a racial aspect to the theory too. So he was another key player at that time. Now, there was obviously another group of people who Europeans, which included, I think, Schlegel, Herder, Voltaire, and who was the guy? Immanuel Kant. They were completely opposite. They were in the camp which was called the Out of India theory, where they believed India was the homeland of all these languages, and from there, basically everything came out. So these were the nascent stages of the Aryan invasion. So what was the early Aryan invasion? Basically, the people in this side of the country, which is India, where they found the Rig Veda and Sanskrit, they were barbarians. And there were these Aryans who came into India and they civilized them and they took over the civilization. It was a proper invasion, as they were, that's their claim. They would talk about a proper invasion. Obviously, over a period of time, what happened was in the 1920s, if I remember, archaeologists basically discovered Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. So then when the archaeologists started excavating, it was not just remnants, it was a whole bloody civilization. It was a township, it was an urban sprawl. So they were like, okay, we thought we were the civilized ones and these people were barbarians, and we basically came and we civilized them. So now what do? Now we found Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. So the whole theory had to be updated. When the update had happened, so what they came up with the later version of the theory, which is now pretty much the accepted norm now, is that, okay, there were these Aryans. I've not even reached to the steps or the genetic argument. They just said these are these Aryans, and these Aryans came into India, and the native to India were these Dravidians, or the Indus Valley people were the Dravidians, and the Aryans came in, they took over and they pushed. And it was all friendly, by the way. The pushing was all friendly. They were like, oh, piche jao, but no fighting. It's just, that's their claim. So now, how did this theory come up? The main base of this theory is linguistic. Now people say that the Aryan invasion, a lot of you must be, even my podcast, I've had, a genetics podcast recently with Dr. Neeraj Rai. But let me tell you categorically, Aryan invasion and Aryan migration, primarily the entire proposal is a linguistic proposal. And what is that linguistic proposal? Well, the linguistic proposal is based on similarities between Sanskrit, Persian, Greek, for example. And on the basis of that, they keep on developing XYZ. So in the linguistic method, there are basically what they call the comparative method, like I was talking about. So comparative method is where they study the development of languages. Basically, they'll have comparisons of two or more languages. Like if they want to see whether they have a common descent or a shared ancestor or stuff like that. There is another method which is called the internal reconstruction, but we don't want to get in that. So what is the comparative method is basically they look at the language over a period of time, and they'll see how how they'll study the morphology basically, or the lexicon, like vocabulary. So they will look at similar words and they'll keep going back according to that. Now, what are the three main claims? It's very interesting that they say there is archaeological evidence, but honestly, what they've done is they've superimposed and kind of confused the linguistic and archaeological evidence with each other. So there are three, to be very honest, I would say two, but there are three, because even the Europeans spoke about the out of India theory, but let us dump the out of India theory completely. Now, when it comes to the origin, see, it's Aryan invasion and Aryan migration is all about one thing only. What is the origin of the Proto-Indo-European language? So how did they come up with the construction or the hypothesis of a Proto-Indo-European language? That is very simple. they look at the similarities between the language families, and then they assume that all these languages are similar, so they have to come from one common ancestor. Now there is this critique that the whole idea about Proto-Indo-European is wrong, but I don't want to get into that. I'm just looking at what it is. Now there are two main proposals of where is the origin of the Proto-Indo-European languages. It could be called two and a half, because the most prevalent one these days is by archaeologist David W. Anthony. I don't know if you guys know his very famous book, The Horse, the Wheel, and the Language. That's actually a very famous book of that guy. I would recommend you guys read that book. So the mainstream hypothesis about the origin of the Proto-Indo-European languages is what we call the Kurgan hypothesis. Now, what is the Kurgan hypothesis? It was formulated by this female called Marija Gimbutas in 1950s. Basically, what is her proposal? So her proposal is that a Proto-Indo-European homeland from which all the Indo-European languages spread out throughout Europe or Eurasia or other parts of Asia. That homeland is the Pontic steppe, which is north of the Black Sea. Basically, there is this area called the Volga River. And they come up with a very weird argument. Basically, the Volga region is because they say that the Volga region is very centrally located, so it was very easy for the languages to spread equidistantly in all directions. So that's their whole claim, that Volga is the best place. And obviously, the Kurgan hypothesis divides it into four successive periods, which they call Kurgan 1, which is the Samara, and I have to read the names, okay, Seroglazovo cultures of the Dnieper Volga region in the Copper Age, which was 4th millennium BC. Then it goes down to Kurgan 2, 2 and 3, which is later half of 4th millennium BC. That includes the Sredny Stok culture and the Makop culture. These are in the northern Caucasus. Then you have the Kurgan 4, or the pit grave culture. Now, I'm not going to give you the technical details. The pit grave culture is basically the Yamnaya culture. This is around the 3rd millennium BC. This basically encompasses the entire steppe region, so from Ural to Romania. Now, this is how they basically spread the Kurgan hypothesis, which starts with the early Proto-Indo-European, which is 4500 to 4000. That is wave 1. Then 4000 to 3500. Then the middle Proto-Indo-European is 3500 to 3000. And the late Proto-Indo-European is 2000 to 2500. These are the different waves. And they say different groups of people went in different directions, and they took this Proto-Indo-European to different areas. And these languages later on developed into what we call, etc., 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 etc. Now, there is another hypothesis about the homeland of the Proto-Indo-European. That is the Anatolian hypothesis. This is not the mainstream hypothesis, but it is there in the Western academia, by the way. What is the Anatolian hypothesis? It is also called the sedentary farmer theory. Now, it was first developed by this British guy called Colin Renfrew. Let me check his spelling again. Yeah, Renfrew. Yeah, it was in 1987. And he says they originated in the Neolithic Anatolia. So this is the main competitor to the Kurgan hypothesis. So what does this say? Basically, in the Neolithic time, there was a historical distribution of the Indo-European languages. And this happened. So they say the Proto-Indo-European is around 7000 BC. So Renfrew. So I'll give you 3 stages of Renfrew now. So around 6500 BC is what they call the pre-Proto-Indo-European in Anatolia, which splits into the Anatolian and the archaic Proto-Indo-European. Then you have around 5000 BC, which is the archaic Proto-Indo-European, splits into Northern Western Indo-European, which is your Italic, Celtic, etc., etc. And then the Balkan Proto-Indo-European and the early steppe Proto-Indo-European, which is basically your Tocharian languages, all that mishmash. So these are your basic proposals. Now what they've tried to do is, obviously now there is what they call the archaeological evidence. Now it's very simple. I'm just going to read. The best way is to read Wikipedia for you guys. It's actually very well written in the Wikipedia page, if you were to. So again, it's very funny because I've just explained the entire linguistic argument to you guys. Now read the archaeological argument summarized in Wikipedia, and you'll be like, "Isme archaeology kahan hai?" So the archaeological part posits an Urheimat on the Pontic steppes, which is basically the Kurgan hypothesis, which developed after the introduction of cattle on the steppes around 5200 BC. This introduction marked the change from forages to pastoralist culture and the development of a hierarchical social system with chieftains, patron client systems, and exchange of goods and gifts. The oldest nucleus may have been the Samara culture, which is 6th to 1st millennium BC at a bend of the Volga. Now, basically, what they do is they have found some sites in these areas, and according to those areas, they are going around making this hypothesis. But to be very honest, there is nothing of that sort that is happening. They have basically hypothesized that this is the most sensible place based on what I have said, the symmetry argument. But actually, Conrad Else made a very good point in one of the videos that I saw a few years ago. I actually saw him live once, and he made a very interesting counter to this whole, Volga River being the very central area and symmetry matters. Then he was like, if you look at the spread of the Russian language or the Arabic language, and I think in a recent video, Conrad Else also used the example of another language, which was the Bantu language in Nigeria, in this one. The African areas. So he said, if you look at the spread of those languages, I mean, they're not very symmetrical. They have completely gone in one area. So it doesn't really matter if you have any sort of symmetry in the spread of languages. Language spread has nothing to do with equidistance areas. It is basically about people going around from one place to the other, and they could carry their languages and ideas from one place to the other. So this is pretty much their claim. They claim that. So remember this, when you remember, what if somebody asks you what is the Aryan migration, there are two main claims that you have to understand. The basic main claim is that what is the original homeland of the Proto-Indo-European language. And when it comes to the original homeland of the Proto-Indo-European language, there are two main proposals, one being the Kurgan hypothesis and one being the Anatolian hypothesis. The only minor change in the Kurgan hypothesis, I think, is made by David Anthony. He's made a slight change in the Kurgan hypothesis where he's made this claim about, I think he's changed the area or the date. I'm not able to recall it. Let me check it in my notes. Let me check it, because I had typed it out separately. Yeah, here we go. So David Anthony, basically, like I mentioned, his book, and it's actually a must-read book. He called it the revised step hypothesis. He basically said that the spread of the Indo-European languages did not happen in what he uses his word chain-type folk migrations. But what he says is there was this gradual introduction of rituals and political elites. So basically what happens is the elites come, they take over the power, so they become the center of power, and because they become the center of power, they control everything and the whole population changes. That's his claim. Though basically he says that Indo-European languages probably spread in a similar way among the tribal societies of prehistoric worlds. Keywords, probably, they have no proof, by the way. Even Michael Witzel basically says pretty much the same thing. I mean, if you have not read Talagiri's recent paper, I mean, it's very interesting that Witzel now keeps talking about the migration, that we don't talk about any invasion. But anyways, we'll take that later on. So Witzel also talks about these small groups and acculturations of small groups coming in, and these small groups having these small effects on these people and how they keep coming in. So pretty much what they claim is that around 1500 BC, there were a set of people, or 2000 BC, 2000 to 1500 BC, there was these steppe people that kept on coming into India. How do we know the steppe people came into India? Is where the genetics come in. So when they studied the genetic makeup of the Indian races, they find that there is an entrance of a particular DNA haplogroup, which is the R1A1, and that R1A1 is the steppe ancestry, and that steppe ancestry people have come into India at around this time. Now, where is the leap of faith? The leap of faith is in basically assuming that the steppe ancestry is the Aryans. How do they justify it is the Aryans? They use the Kurgan hypothesis. But what is the basis of the Kurgan hypothesis? Nobody knows. Genuinely, nobody knows. It is there. That's the Kurgan hypothesis, because everything has to be force-fitted, because they have assumed that the Proto-Indo-European homeland has to be the pastoral steppes, basically, that area. Because they have assumed the steppe theory, everything else flows from that. So when the steppe DNA enters into the Indian, you know, region, it has to be the only one that got the Aryan languages, the Aryan cultures, the Aryan habits, everything along with that. So it's actually genetics is completely dependent on the Kurgan hypothesis, not on the Anatolian hypothesis, because hardly anybody buys the Anatolian hypothesis. So this pretty much is your Aryan invasion theory. I'm not even going to mention the genetic evidence because purely by genetics, nothing can be proved. Genetics relies on the fundamental assumptions of the Kurgan hypothesis, and the basis of that Kurgan hypothesis, everything else flows. It's pretty much that. This is all they claim. They say we have X, Y, Z, but they don't have much of it. So, you guys can just go and Google the Kurgan hypothesis and you can read a bit. See, you don't need to get into the technical details of what is the linguistic similarity, what are the isoglosses, what basically is an isogloss, how do I read an isogloss, what those things are actually pointless. You don't even know what you have to do. But that's pretty much it. So if you know Kurgan hypothesis, Anatolian hypothesis, you first understand those two sentiments. I would recommend two books if you want to get a very good in-depth view of the Aryan invasion theory. One is The Horse, the Wheel and Language, How Bronze Age Riders from the European Steppes Shaped the Modern World. It was a 2007 book by David Anthony. He's a professor of anthropology specializing in Indo-European history. You should read that book. In fact, I'm going to probably read that book with other patrons too. I intend to do that because I think that is a must-read book. That book is like the holy grail of all the people who support Aryan invasion. They rely on that book completely, and the entire genetic mapping is based on that one book and the central claims of that book. That's all it is. All the supporting evidence is taken then from Michael Witzel, because Michael Witzel is the Sanskrit expert. Then they will take some other supporting evidence from other linguistic experts, etc. But primarily it is David, his work, and they completely rely on that. I once again repeat, read his book. It is very important to read David Anthony and his book. If you read that book, you will totally get what the Aryan invasion claim is. This one book and you'll understand their entire claim. Now, let's see. Great. I finished it in 23 minutes. So let's see. Okay. Are there any super chats? If they're not, then I'll look for some other questions and then I'll explain the other things. Okay. Let me see first for the super chats. Okay. Seems like there are none. So let me take a. Okay. What timelines do various ART-AMT theories propounds for the supposed Aryan invasion? How do they arrive at those years? What the definitions of Aryan as per them? It's very interesting. So the definition of Aryan varies now, but Witzel actually, let me see what Witzel had said. I'll give you the exact quote of Michael Witzel too. Witzel had made so Witzel interestingly notes that Arya does not mean a particular people or even a particular racial group, but all those who joined the tribe speaking Vedic Sanskrit and adhering to their cultural norms. I'm quoting Witzel directly. Also, now on the date, so obviously the Max Miller date of 1500. So we know for sure the date of the Buddha. And then they basically reverse engineered going back 100 years every time, and then they reach the date of 1500 BC. That 1500 BC date now has become so important for them. I'll tell you why. Because the steppe ancestry DNA entering India is around that time, 2000 to 1500. So they have to place the Rig Veda at that time. They have to have it there. If they don't have it there, their entire theory collapses. So these are the dates that they propose. Okay, let's see. Did Max Miller believe that the Earth was 4,000 years old based on his Christian belief about evolution and 15? No, I don't think so. It was that. Like I mentioned, it was about the Buddha. What do AIT, AMT theorists say about the origin of the Russian Vedas? I actually don't know about this. I I don't know about this because it must be some religious booga booga. Mm. Okay, Sri Hari K, thanks for the super chat. What we need are good commentators. You do a good job. I also love Michelle Danino. Thanks a lot, Sri Hari. I try my best to communicate the basic theories, and I'll tell you why it is important. We need to do a proper steelman of the Aryan invasion and the Aryan migration theory because basically, uh, nobody gets it. Like I said in the start, nobody gets it. Nobody has any idea about what they just think about it, and I don't know what they think about it. And I'll tell you why Aryan invasion is such a sensitive subject in India. In my view, there are many layers to Aryan invasion, Aryan migration. One is the academic level. I gave you guys the academic level, the Kurgan hypothesis, the Anatolian hypothesis, whatever. Then there is the political side to it, right? And the general, which we call the street version of Aryan invasion. The Now the academics say, oh, we talk about a migration, but what do they talk about really? They say a migration in the title, but below that they basically explain an invasion even today. Like even Michael Witzel talks about the Aryans coming from Afghanistan and they butchered X number of people or Y number of people. These many were murdered. This was murdered. That was murdered. It's actually pretty funny. So yeah, the Aryans kind of were butchers. And then look at the genetic argument. So what is the genetic argument? They say, oh, there is this R1A1 haplogroup is found more on the paternal side. So if it is found more on the paternal side, let us assume, okay. So what is their hypothesis for the paternal side in Europe? Is basically that these people who had this gene or haplogroup, they butchered all those people and they married all their women. So this gene is only found in the male side, and that's why they use the logic. If that is their logic, why don't you say it is an invasion then? Now I'll tell you why they can't find an invasion. If there was an invasion, it's a very simple thing. In archaeology, when you come here, right, you'll find mass graves. When you dig up, they'll find mass graves. Now here is the problem with this theory of mass graves. Where I'll just let me look up my note. I had taken this up. I forgot where I have written that because I had taken so many notes. Where did it go? Where did it go? Yes. So earlier on, it was believed that it was a warrior society. So if you come on in the warrior society, you will see a lot of graves wherever you go. But when they started digging Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, this is what I was looking for in my notes. They initially found a few, pits, and where they found these bodies, and they immediately assumed these are mass graves. These people were butchered. But then in further analysis, I realized the marks on their bone or the structure of their bones was not where the people were attacked, and they actually had to drop the whole idea. And that's why they can't confidently say it is an invasion. So what they do is in the literature, they basically explain an invasion, talk about and give it a title of a migration. That's why I keep saying, they should call it the Aryan dance theory for all we care, because it's just a title. The title doesn't matter. This is actually a pretty silly argument what they give. But yeah, archaeologically, they have not found a single mass grave. That's why they don't call it an invasion anymore. Now, I was talking about the political problem with this theory in India. So if you remember this recent article in scroll.com from this guy, kya naam hai uska yaar? That fellow, Girish Shahane. So Girish Shahane says that it is the Hindutva people who are keeping the Aryan invasion alive. This is one of the most ridiculous things I've heard in my entire life. I mean, think about it. Aryan invasion is the most used theory by three groups in India. Neo-Ambedkarites, they use Aryan invasion. Dravidians, they use Aryan invasion. And the evangelicals who are going around converting people in India. These are the three people who use and abuse the Aryan invasion theory. They call it an Aryan invasion theory. They don't call it an Aryan migration theory. So when Girish Shahane was actually accusing others Hindutva people of wanting the Aryan invasion to stay alive is the furthest from the truth. It is actually the Hindutva people that see the threat of the Aryan invasion theory to the basic fabric of India, to the national, to the integrity and security of India, that they keep saying, boss, this theory is dividing our society into so many groups, and it has been used by all kinds of communist, leftist groups to divide India. And the gall of the guy to actually blame Hindutva for it was, I would say, nothing short than what they say legends are made of. This is legendary stuff. You first create a theory, completely divide the society on the basis of that theory, then you say, it is you bloody Hindutva people who want that theory to be alive. We don't even talk about the Aryan invasion. Basically, what has happened is they just don't find an evidence of the invasion. The archaeology doesn't show that. What does the archaeology actually show? If you guys saw my chat with Dr. Shinde, basically shows a gradual development of a culture, and the continuity is there. If there was an invasion, there would be a spike, some kind of a material spike. It doesn't just, the archaeology just doesn't show it. So they can't do anything. They talk about this weird migration now. Now, what they don't have an answer for is, and I have asked this to everyone who is even a sensible support, a scientist or not a scientist, who supports the Aryan invasion. I always ask them a very simple question. How can you prove that these steppe people, when they came in 1500 or 2000 BC, whatever date you want to give it, how do you know they got Sanskrit in India? And why does the Rig Veda, which is the book of the outsider, not talk about a single outside thing? The entire discussion of the Rig Veda is about the flora, fauna, and everything about this land, which is the Punjab, Haryana, all that region. Uttar Pradesh, Punjab, Haryana, a little bit down, maybe till Gujarat or something of that sort. Or maybe upwards towards a little bit of Iran too. But the point is, it keeps talking about this area, this flora and fauna, this all the river names, this area. Everything is of this area. And another interesting point which Talagiri has mentioned once, if you think about it, if any place you invade, it is rarely, at least I don't remember any case, and Talagiri in his books has also mentioned this, that let's assume the Europeans colonized the Americas. North America was colonized by them, but you'll still find Indian names there. You'll like Massachusetts, stuff like that. Mississippi. These are not European names. These are Indian names, Native American names. Now, in India, all the river names are Indo-Aryan. What kind of an invasion was this? If it was a migration, what kind of a migration is this? The migration comes, we say, please sir, sit on the crown. Okay, boys and girls, all your river names now will change. I'm going to call this river. And we have no recollection of the original names. All our river names in that area are Indo-Aryan. We don't remember. How can that be possible? Just ask them this question. They have no answer. They just don't have any answers for these things. And they keep on saying, no, there is no evidence. There is no evidence. The problem is the theory that they propose has really not got a lot of meat in it, to be very honest. Okay, let's see. What else do we have? Can you get Michel Denino once on your podcast, especially with the Kiluri excavation findings? I can try. I actually don't have any contact of Michel Denino. Maybe I'll ask Talagiri. Talagiri knows Michel Denino. Maybe he can hook me up. That's a good idea. Muslims are also promoting Aryan invasion theory. Well, everybody promotes Aryan invasion. Why is this complicated AIT theory there in our history books? Well, it is there because it is considered the mainstream scientific view. It is what it is. And obviously, it has huge political backing in India. Like I said, your entire political capital of neo-Ambedkarites, evangelicals, communists, and Dravidians, it's all based on Aryan invasion. People don't realize how much of Indian politics is actually based on one theory, which is the Aryan invasion theory. Entire Indian politics is based on that. Guru Chetan Prabhakar, thanks for the super chat. Guru Chetan, if you have a question, I'll be more than happy to answer it. Okay. I see a question below. There are experts claiming to have decrypted the script at least to a certain extent. Can you get one such person onto your podcast? Okay, I think when you're talking about scripts, Guru Chetan, you mean the Indus Valley script, right? The IVC script. Let me tell you very honestly, Guru Chetan, nobody has claimed, nobody has decrypted that script. It is all shots in the air. I mean, if you want, you know what? Let me actually do this. I'll share a blog for you guys. Conrad Else has written a good blog on this. Script. Let me get it. Where is it? Yeah, I had the damn blog on me. Wait. I'll get it for you guys. Just give me 1 minute. Because in fact, I had emailed the blog to someone because they had also asked me the same question. Wait, just give me 1 minute. I'll get that blog out because I want to share it with you guys. Unfortunately, I have to look for the blog because I had emailed it to someone. Damn it. Where is it? It was a very nice summary of the entire discussion on this subject. Unfortunately, as always, whenever I need it, I don't find things. Oh yeah, I got it. Finally. Okay, let me share this blog with you guys on the Indus Valley script. I genuinely feel that yeah, I think this is it. Yep. If you guys can see this blog. So these are the main hypotheses. I mean, I'm not going to. One is the Dravidian hypothesis. I think that was Mahadevan, yeah. Iravathan Mahadevan. This is actually quite a known hypothesis. Then you have the Munda hypothesis. This is by N.K. Verma, Easter Island. This is also actually a very famous one, S.R. Rao. S.R. Rao says that basically IVC is Proto-Sanskritic. It's like Proto-Indo-European or some sort of a Indo-European. Then there are obviously criticisms of S.R. Rao. So these are all your mainstream analysis of S.R. Rao. And this is quite a big blog. I'll do one thing. I'll share the link for you guys in the live chat too, if you want it. Wait, let me share it for you guys in live chat. Here, if you guys can see, this is the link of the blog. You can read it. I honestly believe that you guys will not understand much of it. Trust me, I tried to read it beyond a point. I just got bored of it. It was just boring. These things, I genuinely believe the Indus Valley script has not been cracked open, and it is not going to happen anytime soon either. So Guru Chetan, I think there is no real proof. I just believe I can tell you what the Indus Valley script is. It is a pictographic script. So basically it is something like the Chinese is. So you know how Chinese language is basically pictorial representations. Obviously they have like around 4,000 pictorial representations, and their whole language is you look at those pictures and you know those pictures represent certain words. For example, fighting basically means two women. Argument means two women fighting in Mandarin. By the way, I'm not making this up. You can check it. It's actually very misogynistic, but whatever. It is what it is. Their language. I didn't make it. So let's see. No need. There are some reconstructions of supposed Proto-Indo-European language words on Wikipedia example. Sanskrit word was a language. Who has reconstructed Proto-Indo-European? Are there any academic papers and critiques of this? Like, there are so many. I mean, Proto-Indo-European ke upar you can read Witzel's work. You can read, like I said, basically the whole Proto-Indo-European hypothesis, to be very honest, was by Marija Gimbutas. So, I mean, you can read Marija Gimbutas' work too. And she has given all the details. Then there was Mallory, there was Strasny, and I forgot the guy who was that Russian guy. Never remember his name. His work is also there. So I mean, you could look at that. Okay, somebody says, please bring SK Manjul. It will complete your. I'll try to get him. Sonoli chariots need to be discussed. I think chariots, honestly, chariots ka koi itna bada hai nahi. I mean, I think what they found is they found a pony till now. If you heard Dr. Shinde very clearly, he didn't say we found a horse. They found a pony till now. There is a confusion. So let's see. They are digging. I think they'll find a horse soon too, in archaeologically, and then basically it is going to be game over for them. Okay. There is a channel on YouTube called Srijan Foundation. You can watch. So, okay, not to me. All right, I think I've read all your questions. If there are any questions, guys, ask it right now. Okay, what is the theory about Ratha wheels without spokes and Ratha wheels with spokes? Were the Vedic Rathas with spokes? Honestly, the whole idea about the spoked wheel is that it was invented because the current archaeological evidence points out the spoked wheel has been found outside India. That's what it is. Now, the mention of spokes in the Rig Veda, as per Talagiri's analysis, are all found in what they call the new books. Just let me have some water. Those new books have all the mention of spokes. So I don't get your question. What do you exactly mean? Were the Vedic Rathas with spokes? I mean, there are mentions of unspoked wheels and spoked wheels both in the Vedas. Whatever this Gaj Bhiye, P. Gaj Bhiye has asked this question. So I don't get your question. I think your question itself is flawed because the Vedas contain both mentions. I think aliens gave us. Where is it? Oh, sorry, this one. I think aliens gave us the R1A1. Oh, bhaiya, wow. Oh, it's awesome. What is your idea about Viman Saili and Nagar Saili temple? I have no idea about it. I have no comment on it. I just don't have any comment. Greeks were foreigners. That's why they are mentioned as Yavana. Yavana, yeah. If you remember, the first ever astrology book is called the Yavana Jataka. By the way, just FYI, astrology was Greek. The Greeks got it in India. The first book itself is called Yavana Jataka. Anyways, guys, if you have any other questions, you can ask them now, super chats, whatever, because I think we are reaching 45 minutes. So I want to wrap it up now because I want to talk about the road ahead. What do I intend to do and stuff like that. So if you have any questions, you can ask them now, or I'm going to go ahead and try and wrap it up, and I'll just talk about what I intend to do now in the future. Okay, I don't see any questions, so I'm just going to talk about now. So, okay, so what am I going to do now in the future? So this is what I have in plan. So you guys must have noticed that I've already started a Patreon account. Why did I start a Patreon account? You guys must be wondering, itne time se to kar nahi raha tha. Suddenly, why did I start my Patreon account? Well, here's why I did it. It's a very simple reason. It has come to a point that I can't answer everybody's questions. On a daily basis, my Facebook Messenger or my Twitter timeline or the live chat over here gets bombarded with too many questions, and it is beyond my mental bandwidth to answer all these things. Second, I think when you put some things behind a paywall, it actually makes the discussion better. So this is what I intend to do via Patreon. All the serious discussions that I have now will be behind Patreon. So what I've started now is I've actually picked up all the books of the Aryan Invasion. I'm going to start with Talagiri's 3 books. Then maybe I'll get into 1 or 2 books which are pro Aryan Invasion too. I'll basically read the books with everyone, go ahead chapter by chapter, explain it, answer all your questions there. And I repeat, I don't care about the amount on Patreon. You can give whatever you want to give. As of now, I'm going to treat everyone with the same content because I've not created any tiers on Patreon. A lot of people say, you give me $5, I give you this. You give me $20, I give you this. I'm not doing any of that shit. My thing is, I'm going to create exclusive content over there. Well, I'll go through books. I'll do detailed reading. Like already on Patreon, for anybody who supports me on Patreon, there is one video up there. You guys don't see it on the channel. They can. It is basically chapter 1 of this book, Shrikant Talagiri, the Rig Veda, a historical analysis. This book of Shrikant Talagiri, this coming week or whatever, we'll discuss chapter 2, then chapter 3, chapter 4, etc., etc., etc. So that's what I plan to do on Patreon. From now onwards, I'm going to reduce the length of my monologues too. Like today, I'm going to wrap it up in 45 minutes because I realized, I used to do 1.5 hour monologues and I would be famished. I mean, I can't answer all the questions. And I was tired. Basically, that's what I decided. And I'm going to answer a few questions on the live chat. I'll take a couple of super chats here and there. Whatever. If there are 100 super chats, I'll take all the super chats. But I can't answer all the questions on the live chat. It was basically taxing me too much. I couldn't do that. So this is what I'm going to do. So that's the basic story. If you want to get all the answers to a certain amount of questions, you have to go on Patreon. You can ask me any question there, I'll answer it. You can just message me on Patreon. I mean, a lot of people have messaged me on Patreon. I've answered the question. If I don't know it, I'll say I don't know. But yeah, that's where I'm going to do that. I'm going to host book discussions with you guys over there on Patreon. I'm going to have other kinds of conversations over there on Patreon, but it's going to happen on Patreon because I can't really do it over here. On the podcast over here, I'm going to have discussions with other people. I'll try to do one monologue every month. Like today, I just gave you a basic introduction on what the Aryan Invasion is. I give you the keywords, stuff like that. You can go through that. And that's what I intend to do. This is all I'm going to do. Now, every monologue is not going to be 1.5 hours. I'm going to reduce it to 45 minutes, maximum an hour, and wrap it up no matter what, because I get tired and I'm just famished by the end of it. Because see, what happens is when I'm doing the podcast, I'm not talking, the guest is talking, I'm just asking questions and I'm listening, so it's okay. But when I'm not doing the podcast and I'm doing a monologue, I have to do too much talking, and I realize I don't like to talk all that much. I just like to put my point across and move forward. So I guess 45 minutes now. Let me see if there is any other question that I want to answer. No, I don't think so. I want to answer any question. Boom Shankar says, I like your monologues. Thanks a lot, Boom Shankar. So it's okay. All right. I guess there are no more questions. I can wrap things up. So, yep, pretty much that. Okay, guys. So today we covered the Aryan Invasion, the basics. If you have any further questions, you can, become a supporter on Patreon. You can ask me the questions over there. I'll answer all of them. If you want to know the Patreon link, this is the Patreon link. It's www.patreon.com/Cārvāka. You can go there, support me. Or if you just want to continue supporting via YouTube, every time I do a monologue or I do a discussion with some other guest, you can use the super chat option over there. I'm cool with that. And if you don't want to do any of that and just listen, I'm more than happy doing that. Subscribe to the channel, like, share it with others. And until then, take care. Namaste. Goodbye. Good night.